Good evening. How are you guys doing tonight? I would say today for me was a really productive day. The kids went back to school after having like a total of 4 days off, including their snow days. And Tim and I were able to get lunch as a couple, which we don't generally do a whole lot since we have our kids with us a good part of the time, which in general we don't mind because we're a family unit, so we love having our kids around. But then I was able to go to Pathways and visit with the Pathways people. Hi, Mom. How are you doing tonight? How are you and Miss Bell? How is she recovering from all those shots yesterday? So let's see. I went to Pathways, and then which by the way, I happen to get 2 Oracle decks and 1 tarot deck. That is like, if you think of the board game Candyland, that's Candyland to me. And let's see here. I went to the bank and I secured my business account for the business, which is nice. Everything went through. And then after that, went to Walmart, got some things that we needed, and then headed home. And then tomorrow, I actually go for an in-person interview. It's for a volunteer position to serve on the board of directors it's a new organization in St. Louis called the Veteran Women of Influence, which helps get our female veterans off the street who are homeless, and they help them as far as getting resources, shelter, to help keep them off the streets. So tomorrow I will go and assess this house that's in dire need of work that was built in the 1890s. And the ladies who run it, their names are Dolores and Cynthia. And you can find them on the United Way page under Veteran Women of Influence. They told me that the house hasn't been renovated since the 1980s. So there's a lot of work to be done. And that they also keep up the meditation garden, which is directly across from the building. And it's all for a veteran. So I'm really excited to meet the 2 of them who happen to be Air Force veterans. And one of which suffered with homelessness. And she's able to get herself to where she is today by giving back and helping other veterans. So I think that they're 2 very strong women that I'm already inspired by, and I will continue to be inspired by. So I get to meet them at 1 tomorrow. And then I know you saw, or maybe if you haven't seen it, you will see it, my post that I'll be at the Grand Slam tomorrow with Miss Sharon. And we'll be doing readings from 5 to 10. So if you're not in the mood to deal with dishes and cooking, I'd say come on out and see us. Their food's pretty good, and they did recently renovate it, so it's in a good place. It's a very good condition. Let's see. My mom says she's a little sore, but is getting better now. I'm glad your day was great. Thank you, Mom. Yeah, it was a really great day. And then my husband's on here, which of course, hi, Tim. It's been so long since I've seen you. It was like, what, maybe about 10 minutes ago. I had to throw a joke in there. I'm sorry. I know I'm not always funny. So tonight we are going to continue our Fool's Journey as we're getting toward the end of our journey, which is rather exciting. Our seeker has been through so much along the storyline. So tonight we are delving into the Moon card. So I'm going to hold the moon up. And just kind of take a moment to picture yourself. So it would be like a first person perspective. It's like, imagine being in this picture and being part of this landscape and seeing all of this. And I want you to think about, how does this card make you feel? Does it put you at ease, or do you feel like something's off? Do you feel a bit untrusting? Like not trusting, on guard? Do things not quite add up? They may not look right to you or make sense. And it turns out there's a good rationale for these things. So, because you guys always know that before these go lives that I am delving into the deep exploration of the symbolism. So it's going beyond, say, just the basic meanings of the card that a lot of people are fairly familiar with, or they could just simply deduct by a quick glance at the picture. So we will start off like we always do at the very top here. So this is the Roman numeral for the number 18. And so what happened was, if you remember on last night's Go Live, our Fool was really having to do some inner reflection and introspection and remember their big purpose in life as far as what they believe it to be, because I know none of us truly know the answer to that big question. We have theories, but we really don't know. And that's after surviving the tower, preceded by the devil. So, the seeker really needed to take a break and have that inner healing and reflection and delve into the subconscious and how it is balanced out with the consciousness and how they feed off each other and how one can be to the detriment of the other. So basically, in a nutshell, it's just dealing with all of our inner emotions and, and perceptions of ourselves, and what we believe our role is in the world around us. So with the moon, what I want you to picture is that when we were in the star, when we were in this card, imagine that this was a dream state. It's kind of like when you're dreaming. Some people, they have the gift of having visions. Some have very lucid dreams that provide insight, again, from the subconscious. Well, what's happening here is our seeker is waking up after turning inwards, not being a part of this world. But imagine our seeker was in a deep state of meditation, sleep, reflection, and they're opening their eyes, and this is what they see. And their world does not make sense. So what we're seeing is again, with this water, that's like our intuition, our emotions. And coming out of the water is like a little, let's see here, which one it is. So this is a little crab, but it can also be what they call a crayfish. And my research reflects that he's here in the water because he preceded these two in existing. So I want you to think like prehistoric, dated, before mammals. Think of like the dinosaurs existing. We had these little guys hanging out in the waters, right? So this taps into the primal fear. Imagine times in your life when you may have been scared, but there was no good reason why you felt scared. There was no data to support that. Nothing happened to make you feel scared. So for me, for example, even though I love Tennessee mountains and the vastness of the black starry sky, I've had it before, that same place, same feeling of feeling very vulnerable and just a bit scared of what else is out there that I'm not even aware of. There could be a wolf, a bear. There could be somebody waiting to rob me, especially if I'm alone. I'm thinking, well, I'm more of a target because I'm a female. So, because we have less muscle mass. It's just anatomy. So it's that, or if you're going to the store at night, and maybe as a man, it's not the same experience as a female, but I know for me, if I ever went to the store at night, I'm more alert and I'm looking around me and I'm on guard because I know someone might try to rob me. Now the car is automatically locked, but somebody might try to get in, which I did have that happen many years ago in the military. It's a different time, different story. I did have somebody try to get in my car way back when. So it's times like that where it's like your gut instinct. It's just telling you something is off. And when we're talking about the moon is associated with the feminine. So for example, the triple moon, which I've alluded to before in previous Go Lives, refers to the maiden, mother, and crone. And so I actually wear a necklace with that. And I love the moon, and this resounds with me. So basically, the moon is feminine, and it reflects the cycles, how a female evolves through their life, and how they take on these various roles. The moon also has an impact on the pull of the tides. So that is a proven thing from a scientific perspective. And I can tell you, as a nurse myself who did healthcare in the hospital for a very long time, people tend to act a lot stranger and crazier when there's full moons. And I know many people, between police officers, nurses, anybody who generally has to deal with the public, who, taking care of them and providing services, they could probably attest to a full moon. You will see stranger, crazier things from people. So it does have an impact. My theory is on the water portion of our bodies, which is it's like our blood cells. So you think of something concentrated, but it's diluted out by the liquid portion of our blood. I feel that the moon pulls at us, which causes some of this crazy, strange behavior. So our full is woken up, and think about it. It's like the sun reflects off the moon. The moon does not give off its own light. So basically, when we have discussed the sun in the past, we're talking about truth is made known, that the path is clear, there's warmth and joy to be felt. With the moon, we're not getting the whole truth. There's a lot of unknowns. We're not quite trusting. Is what we're seeing accurate, or is it here to fool me? Is there some trickery in play? And the thing with this, so we talked about why this little guy is hanging out. So we've got two different like dog breeds, if you will. So this is a wolf, which is the like primal, instinctual animal that howls at the moon. But then you know what? Many dogs howl at the moon too. So it shows the domesticated dog. So it just goes to show that deep within us that we are very, very much primal, think caveman days, to where no matter if it's a human or it's a creature, that all creatures on earth look to the sky and look to the moon. I'm sure it helps them with their hunting and getting back and forth to home and finding people, like not people, but the other little animals that are part of their tribe, which I suppose for a dog, people would be their tribe. So the thing is we have this path coming up from the water, and you remember like these, it's like these two, and I wrote the name down, the pillars that have existed on other cards. So I want you to think back for a moment. So the Hierophant, High Priestess. Okay, those are two right off the bat. You remember how they had the black and white pillars, and each pillar stood for something different. Here, they're gray. There's like, the meaning is blurred. There is no definition to it. And then beyond them is a very ominous, see, there's our path continuing in the background. It's a mountainous region. It's untelling what our seeker is going to run into. And again, they generally say this card, despite the use of the color blue in this card, it's twilight. It's getting dark, very desolate, just no support system whatsoever, feeling very vulnerable. So our fool has to continue down this path into the unknown with just a little bit of light from the moon. Let's see here. And then it does go into the phases of the moon too when I researched the card. So I did touch on them briefly as far as the feminine energy and all that good stuff and the triple moon. But what it also talks about is between, say, new moons, waxing and waning moons, okay, full moons, and what those mean. And basically the lunar cycle is a very evolving thing. And so like for a new moon, for example, would be the start of a new journey, okay, or a new thing that you may be working on. And by the time you get to, say, a full moon, okay, you're thinking, gosh, did I accomplish my goals? It's like closure towards something that initially was a new endeavor. So again, evolving. We don't stay the same as what we started out as. So I'm going to look at my notes because I took quite a bit of notes on this one. So I mentioned that we have just limited light, again, and that's significant for limited insight. Our perceptions are very much shifted. The pillars are not defined. Let's see here. So I mentioned how the seeker, which is us, okay, emerging out of a deep interior place, a dream state. Let's see here. So this card exists in a place, again, of a dream state, mythological creatures, and animal instincts. So the meanings would be intuition, which we touched upon with the water. It's one of mystery. There's a lot of unknowns with this card. We're not even sure what we're looking at, if this is real or if it's a figment of our mind as we're awakening from this deep state. Let's see here. Again, I put a star by it's not the full truth. We do not have the full truth in this card. With it being twilight, we suspect deception. Things seem false. There's danger, darkness, the unknown, so very intimidating. Let's see here. So it's mentioning how the water is like the subconscious. And as the seeker gets on that little path that we were talking about and walks toward the mountains, they're going from a subconscious state to a state of consciousness, of higher awareness. Let's see here. What else? And so the moon is also considered the divine feminine. And I had mentioned how it's related to the female. Also, let's see here. That it's subtle and changeable. She has also been named as Artemis or Diana, which is synonymous with the moon goddess for people who really revere the moon. Which I have to say I do. I love the moon. Let's see here. And then basically it's a difficult passage with powerful emotions and fears. So, you know, the seeker is leaving a place where there was peace and reflection. They felt vulnerable because remember last night that the clothing that the seeker wore before didn't fit anymore. The shoes didn't either. That was from a being that existed. He was no longer that same person. And he restarted his journey like as a new evolved version of himself. And again, I always say it every go live in case somebody doesn't see my previous one, sex is neutral. So even though I say he, it could be he or she. Okay. So basically, yeah, that is the gist of this card. So it's like, it's better than the devil and the tower, but it's one of uncertainty. It's not a comfortable card. And the only way that the seeker is going to obtain the full truth is combating their own fears and continuing on. And I imagine it's some of that survival instinct too, because they don't know what's out there waiting on them that could threaten their very well-being. So then the ego takes over. So our brains are always trying to keep us out of trouble and from saying and doing things that could be to our detriment. That's the ego. So he's having to fight himself, which I'm sure in his head it's going off. Don't do it. Don't do it. This is so not cool. It's not safe. So we'll go ahead and we'll look at the other cards that I've pulled out. And here's one. And so, again, you know how all the symbols aren't always present and there's a lot of artistic liberties taken here. So what really stood out to me with this card is this crow feels like it's in a cage. And the landscape appears very brown, dead, barren. We have the water, so we have the body of water there. And there appears to be some sort of fish. So I know basically with the crayfish or the crab, they're wanting to talk about like prehistoric creatures. So I'm not quite sure about this type of fish, if we're supposed to revere it in the same way. But think of the water as emotion and intuitions with that picture. And then let's see here. We've got a lot of black and dark blue hues. Very cloudy. So when we have a lot of clouds, again, there's a lot of unknowns. And then this moon, it's like this big crow is looking downward, and it's almost scary looking when you think about it. So this could be, other than the things that may be around our seeker, which would be our crow in this picture, it could be like the divine, like, oh my gosh, is this it for me? Have they had it with me? They're done dealing with me and evolving with me on this journey, and I'm going to die out here. And all this would be for nothing. And can you imagine? So again, this is not a very fun card. And there's obstacles down that path, you know? So it's like choosing to continue even though you're just so scared and intimidated. Now here's another one. Okay. So we've got that big, beautiful moon. And so we've got what appears to be a black wolf and a white wolf. And that reminds me of the pillars that we talked about with the other cards and how there were very strong distinctions between the two. And when if you think back, in order to obtain the knowledge of either the intuitive, okay, which was the high priestess, or the rules of any faith, in order to gain access to, say, a theoretical, like whatever heaven is in each respective religion, how they define it, they would have to meet those standards in order to pass between those pillars. So here it would show the need for our seeker to pass in between these two really intimidating opposing forces to obtain this knowledge. And then again, it shows this like lady here. So we've got water, so we've got the emotion and the intuition, and it looks like she is in like a state of sleep. It's almost like she's not even trying to get out of the water, and she's just, I would say, very much overwhelmed. So our seeker would very much feel overwhelmed going, you know, from where he was with the star and then waking up to the craziness that was in this card, right? So I think this kind of shows maybe a bit of self-doubt too, because the Fool's right back to thinking, I don't know if I can do this or not. This is scary and intimidating. And so I think, again, it's realizing it's the subconscious coming up out of the water, ideally making its way on land. And then we've got our conscious, hyper-aware alert state, right? So it's coming up out of these waters and just realizing the pull that the moon does have on us. So part of my reading on the moon was when tarot very first came out, it was associated with a state of lunacy. So used to, when people got this card, and this is prior to, say, the 1970s, the author said that people, especially from pagan religions, the very feminist viewpoints, they embraced this moon being the mother, right, of being the feminine. And so they didn't associate this card with, say, madness. But back in the day, this card was associated with a state of lunacy that at this point they believed the Fool, you know, lost it. They were not mentally well, which my research also touched upon. This could be people, say, used to, mental health had more of a stigma around it because they didn't have enough info on it. So imagine back in those times when they used to put people in these institutions because they didn't have an understanding of mental health and they were mean to them, right? Well, think about how those poor people must have felt not knowing why their brains worked the way they did, why their bodies exhibited certain symptoms, knowing that they weren't normal, but not having a way to define it. And once you define something, then you have more power. You can treat the cause and have more so control over it. So moving forward toward present day, that's why we have people in psychiatry and counselors and meds and all these advances in medicine. Used to, they didn't have any of that, and that's pitiful. So that would be a similar state as far as like lunacy from the author's viewpoint, which is Rachel Pollack. She's like one of the, I would say, the mothers of tarot. So I have a couple books by her, and she's really good. I recommend her. And then really, I'm thinking here. And I think that the little things coming down from the moon just shows kind of like the pull, you know, if that makes sense. All right, we've got some more. I've got 2 more cards here. And so here we're seeing 2 beings, and there's like this like cliff between them, and it's like their hair is like tangled up in this moon. So again, it's the pull of the moon. When I see this, it's like these 2 beings are like actually one person. So it would be, say, our literal concrete conscious self fighting against, say, the subconscious and those fears and feeling insecure and inadequate, and having to come at some sort of peace to persevere and continue this journey. And very much feeling the impacts of the moon and just feeling unsure if they can even do it. And then again, looking at that background, we've got predominantly black. There's some light here going forward, like way back. If they continue on their journey, there will be further enlightenment, which makes sense. Our next card is the sun. So there will be truth and full illumination, which we'll go more into that card tomorrow. But here it's just having the courage to do it and to make peace with both selves, right? And then there's this one, which, again, it's okay. I mean, I like it because there's a crow in it, you know. So with this, we're seeing the moon, and there's an eye in the center of it. And there's also a bit of a crescent here too, okay? So this, when you see an eye, it's like you're thinking about maybe taking in your environment. This one is looking up at this crow. Generally they're seen as like, well, I've mentioned they're clever. They could be bringers of some sort of dark news. They are mystical, intuitive. They generally are creatures related to some sort of divine insight. So think back to like even Viking lore. Odin would sometimes come and see people in the form of a crow. That was one of his forms he would take. So they're very powerful little beings, these crows are. So it's kind of just showing how everything is kind of like focused on this moon. And really, there's not a whole lot left to go on this card. Just mostly some gray coloration, you know, and that's it. So we don't even get the full meaning like we did with the original Rider-Waite-Smith. And so again, it's artistic liberties. And this is from a deck not based in Rider-Waite-Smith. And you know, I sound like a broken record, but again, if you're beginning, get a deck based in Rider-Waite-Smith. But you see, we're just lacking a lot of these symbols. You can maybe derive some simply because there's a moon, and derive some of the meanings in your mind and your understanding to what the moon does to us and your understanding of it. But this paints more of a picture than, say, this card does. So what I'll do is, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the commentary. And of course, we've got the chat room. So if you want to just leave it wide open, you can see what responses you get from our group, because we have both new readers in our group and we do have experienced tarot readers as part of our group. So there's a lot of potential to evolve and expand in your understanding. And there's no stupid questions. There isn't. I don't believe in them. It's better to ask and know versus not ever have your answer, and how bummed out that feels, right? So I'd mentioned that I'm doing readings tomorrow. So what I'll do is, like I did last week, I'll hop on tomorrow morning since I'm busy in the afternoon and evening. What I'll do is I'll hop on and I will post a go live for the sun. And then you guys can watch it whenever it's convenient for you. You can tune in and see what you can find out about the sun. And hopefully I can see a lot of you who live in the area to just come by and even say hi. But trust me, if you haven't been in there, it's pretty cool. And they have a lot of good food there. I mean, I've eaten there with my family. It's affordable and it's good. And I think that's the gist of it for now. So I hope that you all have a good evening. I love you, Mom. I hope you have a really good evening with Bill and that you guys get a good night's sleep tonight. And Tim, I'll see you here in a little bit. Bye.